Bible stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of Job. So there was a dude named Job, not Job, Job. And he was super blessed. Like he had a ton of kids and crops and cattle and crap. And he was just living like Larry. And God was all like, hey, yo, Satan, come look at this. See my boy Job over here? He killing the game. He worships me all the time. And Satan was like, well, yeah, of course he worships you all the time. You literally gave him everything. And God's like, okay, bet. You can take whatever you want away from him, but like, don't hurt him. And Satan's like, big facts. And so Satan kills like his entire family and he demolishes like all of his crops and cattle and crap. So Job literally has nothing. But Job still worships God. Told you. Ugh. And Satan's like, okay, but if you let me hurt him, he won't worship you. And God's like, okay, bet, but don't kill him. And Satan's like, facts. So Satan's like, and Job gets all these like sores and boils all over. It's so gross. And even Job's wife is like, bro, just curse God. And Job's like, no, you hoe. And then Job's 3 friends show up and they start giving him some really bad advice. And eventually Job is like, no, are you kidding me? God is good and I'm trash. And God is like, yup, called. Bible stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of 1 Samuel. So there's a kid named Samuel, right? And he was living with a dude named Eli, kind of like a Tony Stark, Peter Parker father figure type of vibe. So Samuel goes to bed one night, and while Samuel's sleeping, God is like, psst, Samuel. And Samuel gets up and he goes to Eli and he's like, yeah, Eli, what's up? What do you need? And Eli's like, sorry, what? You called for me. No, I didn't. You didn't? No. Oh, okay, sorry, never mind. So he goes back to bed, and then a second time, God is like, psst, Samuel. Samuel's like, whoa, and he gets up, and he's like, yeah, Eli, what? And Eli's like, what? And Samuel's like, bro, you called for me. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. No, I didn't. Ugh, okay, my bad. Okay, good night. And he goes back to bed, and then a third time, God is like, psst, Samuel. And Samuel's like, that's it. And he storms into Eli, and he's like, quit playing, my guy. What do you freaking want? Then Eli actually realized that it was God, and he was like, oh, Samuel, you idiot. I'm not calling you. God is calling you. And he's like, oh, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah, so next time God calls you, be like, what's up, Lord? And then listen. And Samuel's like, what's up, Lord? And then listen. Got it. Thanks. So he goes back to bed, and God's like, psst, Samuel. And Samuel's like, yeah, Lord, what's up? I hear you. And God's like, okay, awesome. Sammy, I need you to tell Eli that I'm going to punish his family. Oh, shoot. Bible stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of 1 Kings. So there's a prophet named Elijah, right? And he was chilling in a town where everybody was worshiping both God and also a spirit named Baal. And Elijah's all like, my dudes, you can't do that. You got to pick. And they were like, you cereal? And he was like, dead ass. And they were like, okay, but then how are we going to pick who to worship? And Elijah's like, ding, I've got an idea. What if we set up like a little competition of sorts? So, all right, hear me out. Like, you guys build an altar to Baal, okay? And I'll build one to God. And whichever one catches fire, that one's, God. And they're like, yeah, okay, we can get behind that, bet. So they set up their altars and it's Baal's turn first. And they're all like, oh, great, Baals, come down and set fire. And personally, I like to imagine that Baal was somewhere like, y'all hear something? No, okay. And they're doing their thing, and Elijah, like an absolute savage, is like, you know what? I bet Baal's in the bathroom, guys. I bet he's just taking a nap. For real, he said that, verse 27. So no fire comes from Baal, and then Elijah's all like, okay, my turn. He even douses the thing in water just to prove his point. And he's like, all right, God, do your thing. And God's like, skadoosh. Pew. Bible stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of Genesis. So there's a dude named Abraham, right? And one day God's all like, psst, yo, Abraham, yo, what's up? You see your son Isaac over there? Well, yeah. Look, I need you to sacrifice him to me. What? Kill my own? Are you kidding me, God? I'm God. I don't kid. Fair point. So Abraham's like, yo, Isaac, let's go build an altar to God, okay? He's like, bet. Tight. All right, you grab the firewood and I'll get the sacrifice. So Isaac grabs the firewood and the two of them start climbing up a hill to build an altar. Oh, Dad, you forgot the sacrifice. We're almost there, son. But where's the sacrifice, Dad? Dad, where's the sacrifice? Just a little further now, son. So they get to the top and they build the altar. Dad, why are you tying me up? Why are you tying me up, Dad? Alrighty, now just pop a squat on the altar. Dad. And Abraham pulls out a knife and, hey, God, this is your turn. Oh, right. Abraham, don't do it, okay? I was testing you. You passed. Oh, facts. Oh, thank God. Stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of Genesis. So y'all remember my guy Abraham, right? So one day God's like, yo, Abraham. He's like, what's up, God? And God's like, okay, listen, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are super duper evil. And I have decided that I'm gonna destroy them. And Abraham's like, okay, listen, I'm with you on this, except my nephew Lot actually lives there and he's a good guy. And God's like, yeah, you're right. Well, as it turns out, Lot and his family are actually the only good people in the entire city, so I'll save them because I love you, homie. Aw, stop it. I love you too, G-man. So God sends 2 angels down to Lot, and the angels are like, Lot, so God sent us to tell you to take your kids, take your wife, because God gonna be destroying everybody up in here. And Lot's like, oh shoot, yeah, okay, honey, what? And angels are like, now bro, time is of the essence. Right, okay, here we go. So Lot and his wife and his daughters leave the city, and God starts raining literal fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. And then the angels are like, oh, guys, one more thing. God told us to tell you to not look back at the city, like, at all. And they're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And Lot's wife is like, I could take a peek. And so she peeks behind, and she immediately turns into a literal pillar of salt. Lot's like, huh? Bible Stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of 1 Samuel. So there's a kid named Samuel, right? And he was living with a dude named Eli, kind of like a Tony Stark, Peter Parker father figure type of vibe. So Samuel goes to bed one night, and while Samuel's sleeping, God is like, psst, Samuel. And Samuel gets up and he goes to Eli, and he's like, yeah, Eli, what's up? What do you need? And Eli's like, sorry, what? You called for me. No, I didn't. You didn't? No. Oh, okay, sorry, never mind. So he goes back to bed, and then a second time, God is like, psst, Samuel. Samuel's like, whoa. And he gets up, and he's like, yeah, Eli, what? And Eli's like, what? And Samuel's like, bro, you called for me. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. No, I didn't. Ugh, okay, my bad. Okay, good night. And he goes back to bed, and then a third time, God is like, psst, Samuel. And Samuel's like, that's it. And he storms into Eli, and he's like, quit playing, my guy. What do you freaking want? Then Eli actually realized that it was God, and he was like, oh, Samuel, you idiot. I'm not calling you. God is calling you. And he's like, oh, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah, so next time God calls you, be like, what's up, Lord? And then listen. And Samuel's like, what's up, Lord? And then listen. Got it. Thanks. So he goes back to bed, and God's like, psst, Samuel. And Samuel's like, yeah, Lord, what's up? I hear you. And God's like, okay, awesome. Sammy, I need you to tell Eli that I'm going to punish his family. Oh, shoot. Bible Stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of Luke. So Jesus is telling his disciples that they should love their neighbor. And one of them's like, okay, dumb question, Jesus. Who's my neighbor? Because I live in a condo upstate. And Jesus is like, you know what? I'm going to tell y'all a story, okay? It's a metaphor. They're like, metaphor, facts. Jesus is like, okay, once upon a time, there's a dude traveling through a really sketchy part of town with a little rat-ta-ta-ta action, you know what I'm saying? And he actually got mugged, and he's just left there to die. I've been left here to die. Oh, no. Oh, yes. But then a priest walks by. Oh, phew. But the priest actually just goes around him. Aw. But then a Levite walks by. Oh, Levites are homies. Yes. But the Levite just goes around him. Oh, rats. But then a Samaritan walks by. Ugh, Samaritans. Important side note. Everybody hated Samaritans. Absolutely despised them. So let's call him, I don't want to name any real people, so let's call him Donald. So the Samaritan Donald walks by, and he sees him, and he rushes over, and he binds up all his wounds, and he gives him water. He even puts him up in a really nice hotel. Like no Motel 6 type-ish, like a Hampton resort with a continental breakfast. And then he says to the hotel manager, take care of my guy. Whatever you need, just do it, and I'll pay for it. And the manager's like, bet. Bible Stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of Daniel. So we got a homie named Daniel, right? And he and God were tight. Like, we're talking a ride or die relation here. And Daniel was also the number 2 dude to the literal king, King Darius. Now, one day, King Darius' other officials were like, man, I wish there was some way we could screw over Daniel since King Darius likes him more than us. Oh, I've got it. And they come up with a plan. So these officials go to King Darius, and they're like, hey, Mr. the King, sir, dude, boss man. And he's like, what's poppin'? They're like, your most excellency, we think you should pass a new law. Okay, and what would that new law be? Well, your kingliness, we think that you deserve all praise. And so you should make it illegal to worship anyone or anything or any, I don't know, God that isn't you. And King Darius is like, yeah, okay, I like the sound of that. Make it happen. They're like, yes, and they make it a law. Now, Daniel, who loves God, goes to his room and he starts praying, and he prays literally so much, like so much prayer is happening in this room. And the sneaky officials spy on him, and they see him praying, and they go to King Darius. Part 2 is coming, y'all. Get absolutely hyped. Probably tomorrow, but no guarantees. Bible Stories with Liv. Today's story comes from the book of John. So there's a blind dude, right? And everyone knew him as that one blind dude that was like super blind. And one day, Jesus and his disciple squad were walking by, and the squad was all like, yo, J-Dog, who sinned to make this guy blind? Was it him or was it his mom and dad? And Jesus was like, homies, it's neither. This dude is blind so that God's works can be displayed on him. And they're like, oh, okay. And Jesus is like, watch this, y'all. And he spits on the ground, like, he spits on the ground. And the blind guy's like, whoa, y'all, did he just spit on the ground? They're like, yeah, he just spit on the ground. The blind guy's like, okay, just checking. And Jesus starts making mud with his spit. And they're like, huh, interesting. And Jesus is like, okay, take off your blind person glasses. And he's like, okay. And he does it. And then he puts the spit mud on his eyes. And everybody's like, ugh. And he's like, bro. And Jesus is like, okay, now go wash it off. And he's like, okay, you literally just put it on me, but okay. And he washes it off. And he's like, oh my gosh, you guys get in here. And they're like, yo, what? He's like, I can see. You cereal, dead grass. And then the Pharisees, who were like the super duper religious dudes, saw the whole thing. And they were like, Jesus, did you just work on the Sabbath? That's against the rules.